In this lesson, we'll focus on painting details of the iris. So now that we've spent some time shading the front view of the eye, we now have a stronger sense as to how these different elements that make up the surrounding area of the eye, as far as the upper and lower lids, the flesh above the upper lid, can be represented more three-dimensionally. We have a better sense now of how this flesh kind of wraps around in different areas. Especially up here above the upper lid, where you'll often have this little recess right here, which really has to do with the cavity that your eye is setting within. And so you can actually feel it on your own if you just press a finger up in this area in between your eye and the bridge of your nose. And then, of course, this area right here will often be more fleshy. And, of course, there's going to be a lot of variation as to the intensity of this. Some people don't really have a deep recess, while others have really sunken in eyes and have a deeper recess. Okay. I want to shift gears and focus on the iris. If you ever look at close-up images of the iris, you'll see these little tiny fibers or tendons all kind of pointing inwards towards the pupil. Again, the iris controls the diameter of the pupil, how it contracts or expands, thus letting in different amounts of light into your retina. So I've got a layer over here titled Color, and we're going to use this to color not only the iris but everything else that we see here in grayscale. And I have its blend mode set to color so that we can work in color while still preserving our values. I'm going to go ahead and jump to my swatch panel, and let's grab just like a blue color. And using my brush tool, I'll start to work this in here. So this is something that's a little bit more Photoshop specific as far as how we're applying this, but basically we're just building up our color here, and you could really achieve the same effect in any other drawing application, or if you're just working traditionally. Okay, if you're using acrylic paint, for example, you could still achieve the same effect over time. So just kind of working in what I intend to be really a base color here. But I may want to also have a little bit of variation in there as far as color. Usually don't just have one solid color. If you really look closely at a retina, there's a lot of color variation in there. So I'm kind of thinking about that as I start to kind of work in maybe some additional green perhaps in there as well. Okay. I'm kind of trying to get a sense as to just kind of how I want that to look and feel. But so far, I'm kind of liking kind of how that's looking. So I've got some additional layers here in a group titled Iris, which sets within this front construction group. And so this is where I'm going to kind of basically build up the appearance of the little details, little fibers. Okay. So on this first one here, what I'm going to do is go back to my swatch panel. I'm going to choose a really dark blue. Okay. And for these layers, I'm leaving their blend mode to normal. Okay, and what I want to do is just cover up everything that we have here, and you'll see in just a moment my intention behind doing this. And also bear in mind that this is just my approach to how I would do this here in Photoshop. It's not the be-all, end-all approach, but I think you might find it a little bit useful. So I've covered everything up in a darker blue, and what I'm going to do now is grab my eraser tool. I have it just the size set to be a lot smaller. And what I'm going to do is start to just kind of, in this kind of almost kind of elongated kind of circular motion, start to work in kind of a pattern like this all the way around the pupil. And I may kind of continue to come off of that, revealing some of that lighter color that we have underneath. Okay. Now, if you wanted to do this a little bit more non-destructively, you could do this with a layer mask if you wanted, but I think this is fine. Now, if you're doing this traditionally, then you may want to actually wait till you may want to start with a darker blue, wait till it dries if you're using like acrylic paint, and then just kind of come over it with a lighter color like this. Okay, a lot of different ways to skin a cat when it comes to doing something like this. Okay, all right, so that's feeling pretty nice. So what I want to do now is jump to this next layer, and if you look at, for example, a blue eye, you'll often see there'll be some additional little patterns in there. There's all different kind of combinations of patterns when it comes to these little fibers. And sometimes I've seen examples where you'll have maybe kind of a little bit of a yellowish orange in there as well, and almost kind of like a little ring. And so on this layer, and I want to make sure I'm using my brush tool when I do this. So on this second layer here, I'll kind of work in kind of a little ring, and it's more of a inconsistent ring. It's not perfectly round or anything like that, but I'll kind of start to work that in, making some little areas thicker than others, and just kind of making it wobbly all the way around. okay? And then off of that, you'll have just additional little fibers that kind of come off of that. And I'll kind of zoom in here as I kind of just kind of paint these in. Kind of have additional little fibers that kind of come in towards the pupil, and even a few that kind of come off of that going back out towards the outer rim of the iris. Okay, and we might have a little bit of orange in there as well. It's not going to be completely yellow. You'll often see just a little bit of orange, so kind of dabbing some orange in there. And incidentally, you also notice that I added another layer above this iris group titled Cornea Highlight, so that I'm not painting over the original highlight that I had there, okay, because I want to preserve that. Okay, so we'll jump to this next layer, and I want to grab just a darker blue again. And when you're working in these fibers, you know, they're kind of layered on top of one another if you ever look at a close-up image. And so you want to kind of almost really kind of have that illusion that they're layered on top of one another, almost like there's kind of a little bit of a shadow under some of these different little outlines, basically, that we have in here. I'm kind of adding a shadow underneath that ring that we have, just to kind of show that it's kind of layered on. It's really interesting. If you get time, just do an online image search of some irises, and you'll see just so many interesting little patterns. They're all pretty similar in the fact that all these little fibers are working their way inward towards the pupil. But I just kind of want to add a little bit of shadow underneath some of these. And sometimes you'll also see almost like these little pools of darkness, these little elongated pools that are kind of in between some of those fibers as well. So I'm kind of working in some of that too. Okay, and then I got just another layer here that I've created that I just kind of want to continue to build upon and layer on. Maybe just some lighter little lines, kind of a light blue. Kind of working that in as well. And on that same layer, I'll also work in maybe some darker blue here. Sometimes I've seen, you know, on the outer edges, the outer rim of the iris, you'll almost kind of have another kind of ring. Like it's just kind of a slight little outline, just kind of around the outer edge of the iris there. But already I'm starting to like how that's looking. We could always take our eraser tool and kind of rein in some areas if we feel they're, you know, just a little bit too intense. Kind of dabbing down some of that, just a little bit there. I like to zoom out as well when I do something like this, just so I can kind of see everything from a different vantage point as well. Okay. So hopefully that's been a little bit beneficial to you as far as just kind of my approach, thinking about little details like that. Look, it's a little bit more orange in there as well. But you can kind of see just how far we've come in just a few minutes here, taking it from being very just flat like it is, the flat shaded look that we had, and starting to just kind of build up those details. So in between lessons, I'll kind of continue to tighten this up, kind of refine it, thinking about that kind of cast shadow that we would have just kind of right above right below the upper lid right there as well. Okay. Eventually, we'll come back to this color layer to continue coloring the rest of the front view of the eye. In our next lesson, we'll change gears again, and I want to discuss with you how you could draw in eyelashes so that they don't look like nice little neat picket fenced blades of grass. So stick around. We'll see you then.